During the last few years here, I have been on campus both for Vice President Kamala Harris's visit last year, as well as a visit from President Biden this year. And the response of security has been illuminating, but also curious. The most security I have ever seen, Donald Trump's never been here to this campus, was when the vice president came, which is funny because they had a QR code you could scan to get tickets. So they had a place in the big open gathering area where they were bringing people in and doing a background check and sweeping them for things before they would let them into the theater for the venue. And so there was a significant portion of the campus that was blacked out, blocked off, and patrolled by Secret Service agents in order to vouchsafe the security of the visiting dignitary. And that was at a time when the Biden Harris administration was enjoying a greater popularity and likelihood of reelection. There were more Secret Service agents. We had almost all the tons of campus police. There was the Metropolitan Police Department. Of course, the state troopers came in force with the vice president's entourage when she left. Oh, and when she left, they sounded the fire alarm to evacuate all the buildings so that none of us would be in the building when she left. So they made a big hullabaloo about making sure that no one had access to her until it was time to go up on stage, and that everyone who went into that building was vetted. They marked all of it off days in advance. In fact, a lot of the workers here on campus had to spend time taping up garbage bags in the windows so that you couldn't see inside and see, including places where she didn't go. And they evacuated some of the buildings on the north end completely, canceled classes, moved classes to other rooms so that there would be no one anywhere near in proximity to her visit. Then, on last Saturday, the Trump rally in Pennsylvania, the Secret Service didn't even sweep efficiently, it looks like, out to a 200-meter radius. Now, the way the campus here is situated, there are not any buildings that are not campus buildings that are within 200 meters. There's a gully to the west of the campus that's for flood control, and there's a park on the west side with a large grassy knoll, but it's fairly far away from here. And then there's a small section of housing on the northeast corner. There's a large parking lot to the south that buffers the school from anything across the street. And then the north part of the campus is predominantly landscaping, service, and hazardous material storage. So for most of the campus proximity, there is nowhere to be that isn't on campus that they would need to sweep. There's a large dead zone around the campus that actually makes this campus a pretty good location to be. And I've had people ask me why here, and I'm like, well, it's easy to secure. The building that the would-be pew-pewer used to stage to position himself is far inside the containment area. When the vice president was here, I could not get within probably a quarter mile of where she entered the building. There was a Secret Service guy in the hallway out here, just up past the hallway that goes to the library, so that the students could still use the library, which was not in the control zone. But no one was allowed past that, and it's probably about a quarter mile from there to the end of the building to go outside. And then everything out there was shut down. The automotive department, the finance, the police department, the science labs that are out there, all of that was offline and inaccessible to everyone that wasn't vetted or wasn't under an escort by law enforcement officials. So the fact that somebody was able to carry a ladder and a large bag around and not be confronted is laughable. I once, on the west side of the campus, when the vice president was here, went up to where they did the motorcycle training right to the west of the police building, because I was curious to see if that access to campus was open so that I could plan leaving the campus when it was time to leave work. And when I went up there, they came out to see what I was doing. That was actually the Metropolitan Police Department that came out. and they didn't want me there. So they came. I'm not carrying anything. I was probably dressed like this: t-shirt, shorts. I'm not carrying anything. I sure as hell don't have a ladder and a large, misshaped duffel bag with stuff in it that might be for nefarious purposes. Um, yeah, it's. Oh, and a couple days beforehand, ATF was here, because I'm in the chemistry department. So, making sure that everything was in inventory was accounted for. So I just had to ask those questions, which is fine. And then the president comes here, the sitting president, 46, comes here, and none of those provisions. It's even worse than for the Trump rally, in my opinion. There was only one entrance to campus that was open, but there wasn't anybody there vetting anyone coming in. The entire east side was blocked off. The side with the big grassy knoll and the park on it, that was blocked off. I presume that's how they brought him in. They set up a big tent outside the door, presumably so they could drive the vehicle in, shut the flaps, and no one could see once the vehicle was in there where he was, which I thought that was a pretty good idea. I didn't know what it was for. But they didn't vet anybody. There was no crowds. They didn't advertise it. In fact, it was kept a secret he was going to be here from most people until the day of. We got an email at 5:40 a.m. on Tuesday telling us that he was going to be here. Not a lot of lead time. So the crowd was actually pretty small. If you go look at the president's videos from the president's visit, you'll notice there's no video of the crowd. The theater in which he was seated holds 1,400 people, and I'll bet there were maybe 200 tops. Because after he left campus and he left before they released everyone from the theater, and so I was out in the west parking lot just outside where the theater is and saw people leaving. They were not streaming out, and there were not that many people. The parking lot was pretty vacant, and that was the only parking lot that was allowed to be used by most individuals. So there were fewer cops. There was less attempt to cordon things off. I could get further into the building towards that end exit before Secret Service stopped me. There's an elevator down there they shut off, but I'm familiar enough with the campus to know that if I was standing talking to that Secret Service agent when he walked in, I was probably, as the crow flies, about 100 meters away from him. I mean, through the floor, but and I'm not sure downstairs if you could get in because they even left the Starbucks open that was open or that we have down there in the entryway, and law enforcement officers were there. They were using that to bring people in and out of the venue. I presume they brought him in through the other theater. We have a theater attached to the auditorium. They probably brought him in through the theater into the back service area and then up on stage because they're all around a central hub, which is actually a pretty smart idea. And that way nobody sees him once he, got in the car wherever he was there until he got on stage here. So that was actually a pretty good move. There was no helicopter. The helicopter was out when the vice president was here. There was nowhere near as much police presence. They didn't tell us to cancel classes. I have a coworker who, in one of the mods, who would have been about 200 meters away from the president when he arrived. That building has a sloped roof, by the way, since that apparently matters. And I was just shocked at the difference in security that was lower for the sitting president than for the vice president, and that was apparently had not learned a single thing from Saturday to make things better for the actual sitting president's visit. I found it disappointing and surprising that it's that bad. And they're not like super confrontational either. And our cops, they know I'm not a problem, so they don't. As long as I wasn't anywhere near anything, they didn't do anything. They just would watch me. Make sure I wasn't getting too close. But again, like I said, I had a coworker in one of the modular buildings out there who was in the exclusion zone when the vice president was here, but it was not in the exclusion zone when the president came. Huh? Um, it's just there's way too many unanswered questions and things that don't make sense, and it does beg the question: why was security more for the vice president than for the president? That makes no sense to me. And since the people who are concerned about last Saturday's events aren't aware about that because they haven't been here and they haven't seen both of those things, they wouldn't be aware of that to make that observation like I am. And I'm probably the only one here who will make it. I'm glad that everyone left safely and was able to resume their other obligations elsewhere. That meant we could go back to business as usual because other professors were asking, should I cancel class? And I'm like, your class starts at 4:30. You'll be fine. There'll be some, if they're on the freeway, they might get stuck there, but just tell them to stay off the interstate and they'll be fine because he always uses the interstate for some reason. Anyway, just my observations, concerns, and conundrums about security and the highest offices in our land. Somebody needs to answer these and explain it to me because they don't make sense to me. So we'll see in the coming weeks as they come out with more details about Saturday. Because nothing happened here, there'll be no discussion about what happened here. I'm glad of that because it means that we can go back to business since they decided to have this event in the middle of an academic term when students were inconvenienced. Yeah, good job. Oh, and there were no students at the event either. So the president of Student Loan Relief and Affordable Housing had no one under 50 at his event. Curious. Anyway, those are my thoughts. As long as this channel stands, be safe, watch your own back, because we know the Secret Service doesn't even watch everyone the way we thought they did. And be careful out there. So, mad, mad, mad world. Godspeed.